Hey guys. What's going on? What's up? Make sure you guys hit the like button, share it. Let's get this party started. Hi, Michelle. What's going on, y'all? So my goodness, there's a lot going on. There is a lot going on here in Baltimore. And so I wanted to take this time to really level set, right? Get everybody caught up, which I feel like I do a lot these days, is get everybody caught up, make sure we're having the same conversations, make sure folks know and understand what is going on. First and foremost, this week, I shared that Baltimore City Council approved the plan to increase property taxes on vacants. And so that's a big part of where I want to kind of set the conversation here. What I've gotten so many questions, so much feedback, so many DMs that I really wanted to make sure people understood like the bigger picture, how all these things that we've been talking about for a really long time, how they all come together, and what folks need to be doing, right? And how folks need to be getting prepared. Um, um, so like I said, share this to everyone. Obviously, we're very much live. I have a ton I want to share. Hi, Carla. Hi, Monica. What's going on? Y'all know I like to interact in the chat, so we can kind of dive in based on where folks are. But first and foremost, let's just level set on this special tax rate, right? So typically, everybody wants to complain about property taxes in Baltimore, right? People want to talk about Baltimore City property taxes. So let's start there in general, right? Baltimore City property taxes, 2.46%, is higher than other counties around us. It's the highest tax rate in the state. And so, usually, when we're talking about property taxes in Baltimore, we're talking about them being quote unquote too high. Well, now in Baltimore, starting in 2026, the property rates for vacant properties in Baltimore will be increasing from that 2.46% to 6.99%, and then going up again in 2027 to 8.99. And from conversations I've had with folks in city council, that there is conversation or at least a desire to raise it even more thereafter, right? Raise it even more thereafter. Somebody said, "Where's Martin at?" Yes, I know people like to say I look like Gina. I hear you. I've heard it since I was a kid. Shout out to Tisha Campbell. For this to apply, is vacant defined as vacant notice? Thank you. That is such a great question, Gallivanting Christie. So remember, when we're talking about vacants in Baltimore, from a policy perspective, we are talking about properties that have a vacant building notice. A vacant building notice. So that doesn't necessarily mean every house that's empty. It's the houses, the properties that are recognized as Baltimore City as being vacant. That means they have received a vacant building notice. Hi, Derek and Tiffany. What's going on, y'all? Right? So that means they've received a vacant building notice. So if that policy was active today, then it would only apply to the 13,050 vacant properties with a vacant building notice or VBN. It would only apply to those properties today. Okay. So it doesn't mean just because your house is empty, it means Baltimore City recognizes the property as having a vacant building notice. And therefore, as a property owner, you are currently required to get a use and occupancy certificate. All right. Very good question. And it's a conversation I think is going to keep coming up as we're talking about vacants is, well, hold on now, let's define it, right? Because you have a vacant building notice, a vacant, and then you have like an unoccupied house. And The difference is how the city is seeing and qualifying that property, right? How is it qualified from the city's side? The other piece of that is people should really expect to see more vacant building notices going out, right? The other side of that is areas and neighborhoods and places so we're very much live. So Khalil just got home. So what we'll see is areas and neighborhoods that are currently under development or have planned development coming, right? Or focus areas for the cities, areas known as impact investment areas. You'll see more vacant building notices being sent. Okay, understand that. So that number is going to change because they're going to want to trigger, they're incentivized to trigger this, right? And it opens the property up to a lot more other things because of all the stuff that's going on. So if we have a more accurate number as far as how many vacants there are, then we have different funding sources. We have all of these other things that can come into play, as well as holding folks accountable to actually getting this done, right? Because we know that 92% of the vacant properties with vacant building notices in Baltimore City are owned by LLCs and individuals, right? And so what the city has to do in order to get control of more of those vacant properties is to incentivize folks to either turn that vacant property into a home by renovating it and get a use and occupancy certificate, selling, because you ain't trying to pay all that, because I bought this house for $5,000. What do you mean I have to pay, almost 10% on taxes? Or the city's going to take the property back. Because again, there's this whole ecosystem being built to be able to get control of more vacants. So it's going to trigger other things. And we'll talk about that. Is the notice a red Pentagon sticker on the house? No, not necessarily. So there's a few different signs that you'll see on properties. When you see the red triangle, that is an indicator for, let me not a false flag for my Greeks. If you see a red triangle on the doors, that it means that's a signal to firefighters that there's structural issues inside of that vacant property so that they don't try to go in. So if there's a fire, they'll fight it from the outside. They're not going to try to go in. As you guys are joining, hit the like button on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed, share, all the regular YouTube stuff. Y'all know I don't do this often, but make sure you're doing all the things. Do you know how much you're estimating to make from this change? These vacants are assessed so low. How much will they actually make? So I think it's less about revenue, which revenue is part of everything, right? So being able to get more from these properties means that they're bringing in more revenue from vacant properties than they are currently, which helps offset the fact that vacancy is a $200 million a year problem in Baltimore City in their budget, right? So yes, it's going to bring in more revenue, but that's not actually the goal, right? The goal isn't really revenue. The goal is to penalize those who own vacants and are just sitting on them, right? So making them pay more. But it's also to trigger other things that are already in the works process-wise, right? So currently there's something called the in-rem process, right? And I see those of you who are in next gen say, what's up? Make sure I know who my next geners are in here because I know y'all already know this, right? And so we have the in-rem process. So the in-rem process is relatively new in the city where if the liens and encumbrances against that property are valued higher than the assessed value of that property, then the city can foreclose. Hey, Michelle, what up, girl? So the city can foreclose. And so that means that although the assessed values are so low that this kind of incremental change in the property taxes isn't going to make a huge difference revenue-wise, it will actually potentially put more properties into that in-rem status where if someone's not paying their taxes, it's racking up, they can get to those taxes, water bills, whatever, being worth more than the property is assessed at. So the city can take the property back altogether, right? So it's less of a revenue play. It's more of a site control play, right? It's more about getting control of more properties. Does Baltimore City have a land bank policy? Not currently. So there was a land bank policy that was presented, voted on, and has not moved forward at this time. And the reason for that is complicated. I actually did testify in front of the council about the land bank, because how we do things here in Baltimore is very, 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 very important. And it wasn't given for me. It felt like we didn't have all the questions answered for me to support it fully. But there are a lot of other things in the works to do essentially what a land bank would be there to do, right? Is created to make happen. So there's a lot of things moving. So there's this thing called the Baltimore Vacancy Reduction Initiative. Okay. This Baltimore Vacancy Reduction Initiative, part of that is getting control of more properties in a way similar to like a land bank would, kinda. And to be able to throw that $3 billion, you guys heard me talk about that $3 billion plan to eradicate vacants. That's what they want to use it for, right? To be able to acquire more vacants, to get control of more vacants, to provide funding, to do development, blah, 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 blah. All the stuff you can see on all them other videos. That's what it's all about. And so there's this like huge, there's a big picture to all of the stuff that's happening, and all these different policies and conversations are just trying to line things up, right? In order to eradicate vacants, we need more houses to get that use and occupancy certificate. We need more investors and developers who know what they're doing to get stuff done. I see all those folks in Next Gen in the chat. What up? Y'all already know what time it is, right? They need Next Gen. They know what, believe me, they know who y'all are, right? They know what we've been doing. Because we've been very intentional about making sure that we were preparing for what's happening now, right? Is to make sure that when Baltimore got its stuff together, when the state of Maryland got its stuff together, there were investors and developers who knew what they were doing, who had the right kind of perspective on investing in development, right? Have got some projects under their belt or are ready to be able to deploy to say, okay, now let's go, right? Let's get these projects done. Yes. So this, although there's a lot of people who are kind of in a tizzy, I had someone ask, like, well, are they going to give a voucher if I buy a whole bunch of properties at tax sale? Are they going to give me a voucher to offset the additional taxes? No, because the goal is that you're not just buying up stuff at tax sale and not getting them done, right? The focus now shifts to, how do we get folks who have vacant properties and are sitting on them? What's keeping them from actually getting them done, right? And so I have my whole hypothesis on what that is, which is why we do the things we do, right? My thing is that I think a lot of people have and are sitting on vacant properties because they don't know how to get construction done. They don't know who to hire to get it done, and they don't know where to go to get the money to make it happen. Those are the three problems I think most of those folks have, right? They don't know how to get access to the funding. And even if they do know how to talk to a lender or whomever, they own a property in an area where the cost of renovation is too high for the future value of the property. So then it's a conversation about grants and incentives and who do I talk to and how do I get that done, right? And so for us, right, that's a lot of kind of what we've been doing for quite some time on the Next Gen side, but on a policy side, because y'all know, right, we're in the rooms and talking to, all of the people, the delegates and the senators and the city council people and the mayor's office and all of these different things. The conversation we're having with them is, how do we kind of clear that appraisal gap. That's what it's been called. That's what you'll hear people talk about, is this appraisal gap, right? How do I get projects done in areas where the construction costs more than how much I can sell this property for? And so it doesn't make sense. I can't financially get this done. And so a good amount of that $3 billion headed to Baltimore to eradicate vacants is going to go to investors and developers to get those projects done. Point blank in the period. And so they are going to continuously be looking for investors and developers, just like all those folks in Next Gen, all 1,000 of y'all, right? To be able to give funding and grants and resources to be able to help spur development in those areas. Okay. So Baltimore needs to change the tax deed policy with 1-year house improvement feature. So there is a, so when you're buying a property from the city, like, so if you're buying a property through auction at like one house at a time, a property that was taken back from an owner through the receivership process and then auctioned off at one house at a time, those houses have a requirement to be completed in 12 months. If you buy a house from vacancy value or now bid into Baltimore, there is a 12-month requirement to get that construction done. If somebody asks, is the dollar house program still a thing? First of all, it's not called the dollar house program. Okay, it is called the fixed pricing program. The dollar houses, the houses for $1 for people who are buying the house to live in. Okay, but all those properties have a requirement to be done in 12 months, right? So the question is, and constantly becomes, what is keeping folks from getting these projects done? And I really think, I would say I know, but I don't want y'all to think I'm khaki, but I be knowing what I'm talking about, okay? I think it's because people don't know how to get the work done in Baltimore, which is why we have the Next Gen Accelerator, right? This is why we share all this information. It's why we do all of these things, because we need the folks who own these properties to actually get off of their behinds, get them done so that we can continue to do the work, right? It's slowing everyone down. It slows everyone down. Hey, Next Gen, what's up, Kim? Hi, Carla. And so that's a really big deal. All right, so let's kind of back up, right? So we have 13,000 properties with a vacant building notice, right? We have probably another 15,000 that are vacant without a vacant building notice, to be honest, right? And then we have all those properties, right? So we'll just use 13,000 number. So 13,000 properties with a vacant building notice. We have a goal and initiative to get rid of all 13,000 of them over the next 10 years. Okay. We have $3 billion planned to be raised from various areas, various ways, from the city, from the state, from selling, bonds and TIFs and all this other kind of stuff. $3 billion to make that happen. Okay. And then we have all of these other like projects and things that are super important to keep things moving. So like when I started to get loud about Harbor Place passing, that's because that to me is a big part of this bigger picture, right? How do we do things like get folks into Baltimore so that they can eat and play and have a good time and it's destination, and we're building tourism and we're doing those things so folks know and remember that Baltimore is still that place to eat, play, and work, right? And so we have all of these different things in play right now. And so what is important to me, not only as a developer who directly, can benefit and take advantage of a lot of things that are happening, but also understanding that there's a lot of projects in Baltimore now that I'm not trying to do. I'll tell you for doggone sure, Khalil not trying to do it. He want to do the bigger projects and the new construction and all this, the cool big stuff. He's sick of running around trying to do one house over here, one house over there, one house over here, one house over there, which is a problem that the city understands. A lot of the folks that they're used to working with don't want to do one-off houses all over the city, running back and forth with, using up all of our gas and pissing off all of our contractors. What they need is to be able to have folks who can do 1 or 2 properties here, 2 or 3 properties there, to really piecemeal the fact that there are blocks of properties that need to be done, but there's a lot of properties in areas where there's only 2 or 3 properties left on the block, right? And we know that vacancy begets vacancy, right? So hopefully by now you guys have watched both episodes of Keeping the Charm in Charm City. So you guys know, finally launched that podcast. Doop, 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 right? And so the second episode, the first episode was with Senator McCray. The second episode was with Sean Klowski of Rebuild Metro, and we talked about the Vacancy Reduction Challenge. And what people don't understand or fail to kind of recognize sometimes is vacancy begets vacancy, right? And so if you have a vacant property, on a row home, that's 2 houses on both sides of them, the houses next to that vacant are more they are more likely to become vacant if they're not already. And so vacancy kind of spreads. It's like a disease in a lot of these neighborhoods. And so we need to be able to make sure we can kind of deploy folks to do properties all over the place and not just focus on everybody wanting to hashtag buy the block on Instagram, but actually, like, how do we actually get these properties done? And it's by working with individuals, which is why NextGen is bomb. 100% just refinanced my 3rd renovation since joining NextGen in 2021. Okay, Kim, we see you. Congratulations. Is Baltimore against prefab homes? Not against. It's just a kind of hoop to jump through a little bit from a cold perspective and kind of getting things done. But no, and not only that, we have Baltimore-based manufacturers to do prefab houses. So it's not something Baltimore is against. It's just, there are certain areas and neighborhoods that may be better to do that than others because of historical requirements. Sometimes there's not as much of a cost savings as you would think. So there's just like some misconceptions, I think, about prefab houses. But no, I don't think Baltimore is against it. We've had a few projects that have been completed. And so we do have some examples of that, but it's not something that happens all the time. But it is an opportunity. Also, Kim, make sure you submit your deals if you haven't already. And I'll drop this in the description. We track NextGen Accelerator purchases of properties all over the city. And so we have a map that we show city officials and state officials and the housing departments and politicians to show how much work y'all have done, which is a lot. I'm super excited about everything NextGen has accomplished thus far. And it's really cool to see because it lines up directly with where vacancy has been eliminated in a lot of areas across the city. So we can directly say, right, the work that we're doing and specifically the work that NextGen does has contributed to the fact that vacancy right now, that 13,000 number, is the lowest it's been in decades in Baltimore. And NextGen has a big part of the reason why. But we also are tracking purchases and acquisitions for folks in our larger Charm City buyers family. It's really interesting to meet folks on the street or, at the grocery store, wherever, and say, I follow you and I bought property. And we want to start tracking that as well. So I'll be sharing, if I can kind of pull it while I'm on here, I'll drop it in the chat, but I'll be sharing it in the show notes too, so that you guys can share where you're buying and the properties that you purchased and really how we've helped you do that, even generally, right, as being part of our larger Charm City family. Is there a way to submit share vacants we're aware of with NextGen? It's in McKeltry Park and it's the last on the block and someone's definitely sitting on it. Yeah, you can email it to us. If you don't have control of it, you can email it to us and we can kind of share it within the group to go after. And then you can also, just generally though, if there's a property that is vacant, but you don't think the city has it considered as vacant, doesn't have a VBN, you can call 311. So 311 is a resource to be able to report it. And then the city can, Team KK, what up? And then the city will start that process to send them a VBN. Okay, let's see. So we talked about that $3 billion plan. Baltimore Reinvest Council, Reinvest Baltimore Council is a awesome. Thanks, Chrissy. Baltimore Reinvest Council is a group of folks that were put together by Governor Wes Moore, and it consists of state and city representatives, folks who Senator McCray is on there, Secretary of Housing Jake Day, Housing Commissioner Alice Kennedy. There's a bunch of folks, folks representation from Bill. There's a bunch of folks on this council, and they essentially are setting the strategy for how that $3 billion is being spent. So we went to the first meeting of the council a couple of weeks ago, and it was really interesting to hear how they frame the problem, but really start to listen into how they plan to solve it. So I'm excited about that. I've been talking a lot about how awesome it is to have alignment between the city and the state, specifically right now, and it's a game changer. It's a game changer. People are locked in. I think I was kind of nervous for a second after election. I needed folks to shake it off so we could keep it moving. But I'm excited. There's a lot of really great momentum. If a person has about $100,000 cash and no credit, what's the best way for them to start renovating houses? If you have $100,000 cash and no credit, you can, hard money lenders. So let's be honest. Hard money is not a bad word. Hard money is not a bad word. And if you have capital and no credit, working with a hard money lender to get funding to do projects, they don't really care nearly as much about your credit, especially if you have cash. Beyond that, of course, you can leverage your cash and get a line of credit and do all that kind of stuff. But hard money lenders don't really care about your credit. That's why they're there. You're going to pay more, yeah, because it's riskier and your stuff's not together, but you can still start. I don't believe in the crap that people shouldn't work with hard money lenders. I think you have different options. You have tools in your financial tool belt. Next gen, y'all know I say that all the time. And you pull out the tool that's going to make sense for where you are and your full situation. Yeah, so like I said, the red marking on the front of vacant properties is an indicator for firefighters that there's structural damage, structural issues or concerns inside the property. So if it catches on fire, they're going to fight that fire from the outside and not go in. Yep, the better the credit, the better your rate. Exactly, Kim. Exactly. Perfect. So that council is going to be really, really interesting to watch and stay tuned on. I'm trying to think of how much I want to share about some of those meetings. I know we already talked about Next Gen, but it's going to be very, very interesting to see what they come up with and how they direct those funds. And actually, it's critical to understand because that's a lot of money. And we don't got time for people playing around, right? So what they choose to do and how they choose to focus and how they frame the problem is going to be a really, really big deal. And the thing that I keep bringing up and reminding folks is that even if all $3 billion is handed out in $100,000 increments to everyone who has a vacant house, right? It's not going to necessarily solve the problem. So just because houses are renovated doesn't mean that there's people in them. So there's another conversation that has to happen and needs to continue to happen. So this is a message to all my friends who are decision makers on a lot of these things, who I know y'all be tapping into. We have to make sure that we are spending time, money, and energy on how Baltimore is branded, right? Changing the narrative on Baltimore. We talk about doing that ourselves a lot, right? We have to change the narrative on Baltimore. We have to make sure folks know and understand the truth behind Baltimore, which is, one of the truths is that, homicide rate is down like 50% over the last 2 years. That, there is a really strong tech community here and entrepreneurship. And, we have 2 HBCUs and, world-renowned hospitals and, all of these things. We have to change the narrative about Baltimore. Okay. We have to make sure that we're driving folks who want to live here so that they understand the incentives that are available, right? So the closing costs and down payment assistance and all of those things, right? Reminding folks that you are going to get a house 3 times the size and a quarter of the price than you would in DC. That even in Philly, right? We have pricing is different here than even in Philly, that we got the best food, right? Highlight all of the great things about Baltimore to be able to shift and change the narrative, right? And we're doing that so that as these houses are being developed, that there's folks ready, willing, and able to purchase and rent them and do whatever they got to do, right? Part of that also means how are we focusing on telling the truth again, right? Narrative around our school system while also making sure we're supporting our kids. There are great schools in Baltimore. They're great public schools in Baltimore, right? That conversation isn't being had the way I think it needs to be. And of course, we need to make sure that the folks who are doing the work know what they're doing. And, again, we solve that problem with Next Gen and the information that we share, but we really need to make sure that we're being intentional about who and how we're dispensing the funds and providing properties to get the work done. Thanks, Tiffany. Is a housing problem more with investors doing townhouses or single family homes? You mean what types of properties have the most vacants? So we're going to have more row homes. So in Baltimore, we call them row homes, and historic homes, we talk row homes. Townhomes are usually new construction, just a Baltimore linguistics thing. So row homes, we have more row homes than single family detached houses. So just for that reason alone, there's going to be more vacant row homes than there are single family detached houses. Do we have single family detached houses that are vacant? Yes, but not nearly as many because they're not as plentiful, 1. And 2, they tend to be in neighborhoods that are more stable and therefore don't have as many vacants in the first place. So then that means that they may not have the same challenges as other areas where the property valuations are lower and, maybe there may be less demand, things of that nature in certain neighborhoods that have a higher vacancy rate. Because again, right, vacancy begets vacancy. So if you are in a neighborhood that's more stable, you have less vacants. Vacants are less of a problem. You're probably sending less vacant building notices. Yes, Chrissy, thank you. Because I didn't get to finish what I was saying. So yes, we need to market, right? And so we're not only marketing to bring folks in, but also changing the narrative that we have in our heads about Baltimore when we're here, right? And so when you're from somewhere, a lot of times you're like, the vibe, you underestimate sometimes your own neighborhood. Everybody does that from where they're from, right? We have to retain residents. It should be easier to retain residents in these areas that have been there through and through to stay than it is to try to change somebody's mind about Baltimore who's never been here. And so, and again, that was a topic of conversation in episode 2 of Keeping Up with the Charm in Charm City with Sean Klowski from Rebuild Metro. We talked about how we have to retain residents in these neighborhoods and how important it is to be intentional about that. And so I will say part of some of that money that folks are that is being brought into Baltimore, some of that is for a good amount of that's going to be for legacy residents to help them to stay, right? So to be able to do improvements in their properties. If they're going to support investors and developers doing full rehabs, they should also support residents to upgrade their homes and get their roofs done or do facade improvements. So if all the other houses on your block are flips and have brand new fronts, the legacy resident who lived on that block all that time, she wants a new front too, right? And so some of the funding is for that as well. But thank you, Chrissy, for bringing me back to my point, which is that we have to retain residents as we're bringing folks in. And remember, right, there's this kind of larger conversation in all of this is also, growing the population of Baltimore, right? And so when we talk about population shifts and changes in Baltimore, the population has decreased. Everyone's like, Baltimore, population decrease. Well, let's talk about who's leaving, right? So there's a decrease in population, but there's an increase in the number of households. So there's this natural shift that's happening everywhere, which is people aren't having kids, they're waiting longer to have kids, they're not having as many kids. You have, more single folks or whatever. And so the household side nationwide is smaller, right? But we also have folks who are in Baltimore. We have a population of Black residents who have left Baltimore and gone into the county or whatever because they sick of the shit. Am I allowed to say that on YouTube? There's a lot of people who sick of the stuff. They tired. We've been talking about it's time for Baltimore for 11,000 years. They sick of it, right? Now I'm like here, like, hold on. Change is coming, right? And so we have to be able to show that that's true. We got to be able to show that that's true. And I think that we're putting those pieces in place, but we got to amplify it and make sure that people that need to know do. And we're getting them. We're knocking on doors or doing whatever we got to do to hold people in place. We're doing things like making sure that folks know that the homestead tax credit is there for homeowners. So as the property values in your areas are skyrocketing, that you are protected from your property taxes increasing and doubling and tripling or whatever things that folks are having happen as reassessments are happening because they don't have the homestead tax credit. So I'm glad that you mentioned needing residents to say, because obviously that's something that's really important to me, but it's actually really important to the entire strategy. If I hear about the wire one more time, I'm gonna lose it. Yeah, I think so too. I think he'll help with the rebranding. I honestly, and this is again another shameless plug, I hope that they tap on us intentionally to help with the rebranding and the messaging and build on what we've been doing to be able to share that on a really on a really high level. Sorry, my ring light shut off. Said number one tip, please do not think you can follow some generic real estate investment training and be successful in Baltimore City. That is a recipe for disaster. Yes, which is why Next Gen is Baltimore specific, right? We can talk about real estate generally everywhere, but we can't get into the nitty gritty like we get into the nitty gritty in the Next Gen family, right? I'm gonna tell you, my friend bought a house around the block. Or did you know that there's a stream under your basement on that street? Can't do that when you're learning about general real estate stuff. And it's just different. Baltimore is different. And that's why I think 92% of those vacant buildings are individually owned because you think, oh, this house is cheap. I'm going to come in. I done did 75,000 houses somewhere else. Like Baltimore is unforgiving with that stuff. Don't nobody care what you did nowhere else. What have you done for me lately here? Okay. So true. I'm part of another real estate investment network, and although they're great, they don't have all the specifics about Baltimore. Exactly. And those are people who are in Next Gen talking about they've done other things, and it just, you know what I mean? Can't compete where you don't compare. All right. Does Baltimore need more organizations similar to NACA to help people transition into home ownership? We have NACA here. So we have NACA here. We have tons of home ownership counseling, nonprofits. We have we got a nonprofit for everything, to be honest. We have no shortage of funding for those nonprofits, be it right or be it wrong. So we have a lot of that. We have organizations whose complete existence is home ownership in Baltimore. The challenge is, who are they talking to and how, right? And being kind of with the times and with the people to be able to target folks. I think that we need to get more innovative. Um, there's organizations like, so, and I'll call them out specifically. Live Baltimore is great. They do a lot. They have their own bus tour, which not to be confused with ours, where we're focused more on investing and getting into the properties and all that. Live Baltimore is really focused on educating on like the neighborhoods and home ownership incentives and things like that, which is great. And I would love to see them expand their reach and how they're connecting with folks and who they're connecting with and who they're supporting and how they get integrated into the neighborhoods that they market to make sure that our legacy residents are getting the same information, just as much, if not better, than everybody else. No shade, no tea, just a little feedback. NHS is a great resource for residents. There's tons. The list is actually wildly long, which has its benefits and its challenges. But yes, there are tons and tons of resources, NHS being one of them. And like I said, NACA has an office here in Baltimore. I've sold to NACA buyers before, right? I've gone through the process. I've had several next gen folks go through NACA. NACA is a decent resource. The challenge sometimes is these are older houses and kind of getting through the process. But yeah. But as a way, too many nonprofits that, look, don't get me in trouble. I'm already saying too much. But yeah, I mean, I think that's also interesting too, right? As we are raising taxes on vacant properties, what does that mean for nonprofits not required to pay property taxes that may or may not own the most vacant properties in the city? But let me, yeah, I mean, hush. The other thing that just reminding folks, I talked about this a while ago. Not only are the property taxes increasing, also those environmental fines. So, you start getting all them letters to say that you need to board up your house, you have high grass, all those types of things. Those environmental fines, they've increased those as well. So again, trying to make it easier for the city to get control of more properties. If you are negligent with your ownership, they are going to tax you, right? Whether through property taxes or environmental fines or what else, and be able to get that up so that your liens, how much you owe against your property, is more than the assessed value, how much your property is worth from a tax perspective, so they can foreclose and take that baby back. And they are actively growing the team that does that. They have internal hires for lawyers, internal hires to manage the process. Now, it's been a time. They started this a year ago. I ain't gonna lie to you. There's a lot of properties on the list that are eligible to go through that program, and they still trying to foreclose. The whole point of this was to be fast. Rome wasn't built in a day, so I'm giving them grace. But expect, as funding becomes more available, that timeline shortens quickly. Bloop, bloop, bloop. So one of the things that we'll be doing, so this is a heads up to next gen, and all y'all folks that have been bluffing for quite some time. We are going through a process to update and revamp and just really upgrade some of the details that we go through about construction and navigating the process in Baltimore. There's a new permitting system that's coming out that we're going to be previewing. And so really building out some education around that construction process is something we're excited about tackling. And of course, we already do that in Next Gen, but to update the curriculum, where we talk about it a lot in the live sessions, but updating the curriculum specifically. And so we are going to really, going into 2025, help tackle some of that educational gap when it comes to construction and navigating the process here in Baltimore. So expect to hear more about that. Those of you on the email list will hear about that more tomorrow, because there is one, obviously changes coming because there's new systems coming out. And so we want to make sure folks are getting ahead of that. But we know that there is an education gap, right? And not only that, people need to be able to get access to information as they need it and ask questions and be in a community. And so that'll be one of several focuses that we have going into the new year. So just give me a heads up on that. And we jump back in the chat. Why does all the new construction in Baltimore look, not my new construction? What new construction? Well, I shouldn't be that messy. You mean like actual new construction? I guess it depends on, y'all really trying to get me in trouble today or what? I guess it depends on who's doing it, right? I think that there is a, different builders are going to focus on different things. Some builders are really focused on speed. And sometimes when, when you're focused on speed, sometimes you lose quality in there. But we had some new construction. We'll be moving some dirt in 2025. So do we anticipate losing the Senate will slow things down, or having Angela in place will still keep things moving? I'm nervous. That's a great question. There has been a lot of conversation about what the impacts federally will have. Having Angela also Brooks elected to the U.S. Senate is great because it has someone who is aligned with kind of this super team we have between the city and the state on the federal level to help control some of those purse strings. How funding is disseminated and the decisions that are going to come from the Fed down could potentially impact several projects here in Maryland, not just the rebuilding of the bridge, but, a lot of stuff. And so infrastructure, like a lot of plans that were set forth by the Biden administration. And so my big thing has been to pivot. And also, quiet as it's kept, my other big thing is we gotta shut it up, right? We don't need to have an extra target on our back. We already know that there is, there has been a lot of ownership of property in Baltimore by the Trump family. We know that they didn't do terribly well here in that because there was a lot of they didn't do very well. Google it. Okay, people weren't happy. And that was pre presidency before. And so, there's a line that can be towed, right? And so when Trump was president before and the Opportunity Zone program became enacted, he actually was going to use Baltimore as the pilot, like as the city that they wanted opportunity zones to just like completely transform. And so he was coming to Baltimore to do that launch, and actually was going to come into the area and probably the block that we were working on to have that conversation at that time. And so there is a potential opportunity where he, as a real estate guy, sees and understands the progress and the opportunity and the policies and all that kind of stuff. And we actually have some benefits there. But that can only happen if we know how to put the first thing first, right? And I am very big on you shift and you pivot, right? If Vice President Kamala Harris got into office, that would have been like, I don't even know, like the stars truly aligning, right? Like we all friends, okay? That would have been a lot. It would have been great. And also here, this is where we are. Pivot, move, bob, weave, and get the work done. That's my perspective. Get the work done. Because I can't control none of that right now. but I do know what I can control. And I also know that if one of the things that is being focused on federally is giving the state control, with having Governor Wes Moore in office in one of the richest states in the country, if the solution or the plan is to give states more control over what's happening in that state, we finna be all right in that realm, right? We saw how the election went for Maryland. Oh, y'all that ain't in Maryland, move here. I got a house. We have a house. Next gen got houses. People in the chat got houses. Y'all don't like what's going on in your state? Come to Maryland. We are open for business. Baltimore is open for business. Okay? Live, work, and play. Come get something to eat, baby. We got crab cakes. All right? If you don't like what's going on in your state, come on down. But honestly, we can't control nothing else. Says sell it. Come on. We got vacancies to fill. We got 13,000 houses for y'all to go ahead and move into. You pissed where you at? I hear you. Come on. We got down payment and closing assistance. Okay. So that goes to what I was saying before, right? How are we marketing and changing the narrative about Baltimore? Baltimore is in Maryland, and we have our stuff together, right? Affordable. Where else you getting a house for, 2,000 some square feet for $250,000? Come on down. That's my mindset at this point. Okay. Said Texas got us beat. Got us beat for what? He said we leaving here with something. You hear what I'm saying? We gotta change. We gotta shift, right? You gotta shift. You can only control what's in your control, but baby, what I control is gonna move, right? You're gonna do what you're gonna do, but make it do what it does. Make it do what it does. Saying DMV got the richest black folk though. Now Baltimore is not the DMV. You're not gonna get me caught up, but we in there, okay? We in there. Why is Maryland one of the richest and most educated states, and Baltimore still looks the way it does with a lack of industries? Is there a lot of black wealth in Baltimore, you think? So I'm not going to, so let's really talk about it, right? So Baltimore is the birthplace of redlining. There has been consistent systemic issues in Baltimore. The previous governor administration literally had a map of Baltimore, a map of Maryland, and left Baltimore completely out of the map. Right? This is why I said the alignment between the city and the state is really important, because for a really long time, Baltimore didn't get the attention, the love, the respect, whatever, from Annapolis, from the governor's mansion, to be able to make the progress that we needed to make, to be honest. Right? We're really going to talk about it. You want to say, like, when we even talk about Baltimore, you talk about crime, Baltimore City just now, this year, this administration got control of its own police department. The police department in Baltimore City reported to the governor, reported to the state. So Baltimore had no control over its own destiny, to be honest. Now, do we need to take accountability for things? Absolutely. And I'm saying I ain't from here, so I ain't do it. Okay. I ain't do it, but I'm gonna say we, right? And so are there things that we need to take accountability for? Absolutely. But we have to understand politics. And this is why I don't just talk about the bricks and sticks, right? I can talk about the houses and the all day long, but we have to understand the policy, because policy influences the property. And so there were a lot of policies that held Baltimore back. Not only, and then we have the state, and then, let's hold the city accountable too. Mayor Brandon Scott, the only mayor we've had in 11 years to get a second term, because everybody else get kicked out, sent to jail, right? So we've had plenty going on locally that has been a distraction from the work, which is why now is different. We're in a different time. And then speaking of Black wealth in Baltimore, when we look at the population shifts that have been happening, people with Black folks with education, like, higher education, higher salaries, that is absolutely who's moving here. Absolutely. Not only that, there's been Black wealthy people here. Let's be very clear. But when we talk about population shifts, that is who's being attracted to the city. Folks with money. Why? Because they want their money to spread further, right? Just because you got money don't mean that you want to pay $6 for a 12 pack of eggs. You still want better cost of living to stretch your money to build actual wealth. You don't just want money, you want wealth. Well, to do that, you need to make sure your money is going further. So we're moving to Baltimore. I get a crab cake and a nice house and keep money in my pocket. They're not the Baltimore commercials. All right. Let's see. So Baltimore is more like DC in the past. Precisely. Baltimore, people talking about Baltimore is New York. A lot of the areas in New York in the 80s, right? Got DC in the 90s. We're shifting and shifting quickly. Someone said, I'm coming to Baltimore. I need the finest chicken box and a crab cake. Salt, pepper, ketchup. Got to make sure that the fried chicken got a little crack on it. Not that kind of crack. But crack. You know. All right. I don't know why y'all got me acting up on here today. Okay. Now, let me make sure I covered everything I want to talk about. The bottom line is, if you're getting your rehabs done on these vacant houses, you don't got to worry about paying a whole bunch in your property taxes. Like, that's the bottom line. If you're getting it done, right, it's 2024 now. The property taxes increase by 2026. If you have a vacant house now and you're not going to be done by June of 2026, you're part of the problem. You're part of the problem. It's time to tax you. I'm sorry. Now, the people who are asking questions about, well, isn't that going to make it harder to buy vacants from individual sellers? That's more of a conversation. So I have had talks with folks. There is a process to be able to wipe liens when you're transacting from one person to the other. And so I was talking to them. I talked to a few people about that the last couple months since I knew that this was coming, about how to upgrade and streamline that process so that it works, so that this policy doesn't inadvertently create a problem for private sales to actually happen. So that is a real concern. But the rest of y'all need to go ahead and get you a hammer and some funding and get this stuff done. Get it done. I told y'all however many 8 years ago when what's his name from Philly was telling y'all to just buy houses and sit on in Baltimore. I told y'all don't do it. There's a video right here on YouTube from 2018. I said, don't do that. This is why. Get it together. All right. Okay. Let me get up off of here. I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your week. Make sure you go and watch the first 2 episodes of Keeping the Charm in Charm City. Right now, I've been releasing them every other week. We will be kind of ramping that up. I've had so many really, really great conversations with folks. I hope you guys are enjoying that. Please provide your feedback, like, comment, subscribe, do all of those things. We about our business, right? You bob, you weave, you pivot, and you get the work done. One foot in front of the other. That's all you can really do. Make sure you're making at least small progress towards your goals every single day. Even if it's not the big stuff, do something, because there's work to be done. There's success to be had. And the opportunity is now. Okay. Next gen, you already know the vibes. Love y'all. And we'll talk soon. Bye. Tiffany and Michelle, y'all message each other in the community. Y'all are all next gen. What up, guys? All right. Have a good night.